Now, here's a tuning I didn't really think was possible on one instrument: the span of 4 whole octaves over 5 strings. That's more range than the 10 string, at half the strings even. One particular commenter on some of my other alternative tuning videos, Philip Schleipfer, actually brought octave tuning to my attention, and having recently messed with a piccolo tuning on the super long Kalium bass, I realized basses can actually tune pretty high, and with the super low subcontra bass note I was able to somewhat pull off at the beginning of this channel, this Ibanez 5-string seemed to be staring me straight in the face. Since I hardly ever throw out strings from constantly retuning, most of them not even having been played for more than a couple of days, I figured I already had some of the gauges I need in reach. Ideally, I would have wanted a tuning that started from a guitar's E4 and went all the way 1 octave down below a bass's E1, but before we get to the full demo, I did run into a few struggles. This is Kevin from Said Too Much. Being extremely cheap when going into implementing this idea with a standard 5-string tuning on the bass to begin with, I noticed I already did have that E1 in the correct spot nonetheless. I was actually able to fish out the original contrabass string, cut exactly to the lowest machine head, with the nut still cut to fit this string gauge as well. The E2 and 3 were a little more difficult, but I found some unused strings and partial sets to use. With fingers crossed, I thought I could transfer the piccolo bass string, but it turned out to be just too thick to tune high enough before breaking at the ball end. Ordering strings a little thinner, yet another one snapped at the ball end, trying to tune it up slowly over hours even. So for the next attempt, I flex glued the wraparound portion, and conceded to tune it up only to a C sharp, matched by the other strings, 3.5 steps shy of those E's. C sharp 0 was as low as we went in that original video, but it's arguable whether or not it's an actual viable note in that standard scale length, as we continued some interesting experiments in that subcontrabass saga. But at least we're at a decent starting place, and we can always just tune higher as we go. So what do y'all think? A practical tuning? Something to at least just try once? Octaves tuning actually reminds me more of chorded instruments, like a 12-string guitar. If you're unfamiliar, these instruments have octave notes placed really close together so you can play them with one fingertip, before moving on to another cluster, usually a more normal 4th or 5th away. I don't really think you could place these 5 strings close enough together though, to play with just one fingertip. Another thing to point out is how the disparity between the 2 highest is a lot lower than the 2 lowest. I had to just lightly use my fingertip to fret that thickest string, while still trying to fret the rest. Each string is more or less double the next highest string, and I don't think we can really add anything thicker here. Going lower would require something almost a half an inch thick, which brings up the issues of no longer acting like a string and having a fundamental frequency that's lower than 9 Hz, on top of that doubled disparity. Going higher would require something like an impossible .006 string if you were curious about going in the other direction, so it seems like 5 strings is the limit here. This turned out to be a pretty fun tuning, thanks again to Philip, so keep giving me your comments and ideas. For now though, enough said. For early video access, raw instrument tracks, and more exclusives, find our community on Patreon and consider adding your support.
Said too much.